For me, the thought of independence is the thought of a better future, a thought of being able to vote and know that the government that's going to be in is going to be doing their best for you.
Oh, well, like, initially my intention was to allow this to play for a wee bit more before I pause it, and it's nothing to do with any copyright infringement. It's just because even I find it somewhat irritable to sit and listen to somebody who stops and starts a video every 2 seconds. But right off the bat, the latest piece of SNP propaganda, for there is much to go through, admittedly, or this is a video that came out last month, but nonetheless, starts off talking about the people of Dundee, the yes voters of Dundee. What exactly, I would like to stress this point, this question even, over and over and over again, what exactly is this vote for? A yes vote means what exactly? Because, we're all about democracy here in Scotland, and if you disagree with that principle, then you're a democracy denier. So, I'd like to know exactly what it is we're talking about here, because fundamentally, irrespective of how much they dress this shite up, and shite it is, pardon my French, they try to dress it up, they throw in the little bits of nationalistic talking points here and there, but fundamentally, what this is really about is European Union membership. That in order to entice and incentivise voters, goad voters into coming on board, they will begin to use nationalistic talking points, point to problems with the UK as an institution, as a union. But what they don't then say is that we have every intention to rejoin the European Union. It kind of goes without saying, as I've stressed before in videos, that's the intention here, or that's the implication even. But this individual here, I just want to point this out very quickly. Okay, admittedly, there isn't a government out there that does not produce propaganda with the sole purpose of trying to place themselves onto a pedestal. So people that speak on their behalf, whether it be activists, whether it be politicians, whether it be the media that are on their side, the National, I'm looking at you, they will always come away with tripes such as our government, this government is going to do, or our party is going to do what's best for you. Yeah, oh, is that right? She also said as well, a thought of being able to vote and know that the government that's going to be...
The government that's going to be in is going to be doing their best for you. Building.
Well, that's funny. That is really quite a humorous statement. And let me provide yet again, because I know I repeat myself quite often, but as I've said, I will continue to repeat myself so long as the SNP repeat themselves. Their narrative goes unchallenged for the most part. Revisionist history, selective history, and by and large, a narrative predicated on bullshit. So let me provide you with something to ponder on. Every single programme of government that the SNP have unveiled since round about the 2015 era, there's always at least one mention to the Sustainable Development Goals. Agenda 2030 as it's more commonly known, which is Agenda 21 by and large. But back in 2015, this is on their own website, this is on the Scottish Government's own website, where it says, and there's a quote from Nicola Dunlop's when she signed Scotland up back in 2015, did you vote for that? Oh, they've got your best interests at heart, that's why they're enacting policies that are out with your control. The United Nations global goals offer a vision of the world that I believe people in Scotland share. The national and international dimensions to poverty and inequality are interlinked. Scotland cannot act with credibility overseas if we are blind to inequality here at home. And our ambitions for a fairer Scotland are undermined without global action to tackle poverty, promote prosperity, and to tackle non-existent man-made climate change. Now let's just take climate change in and of itself as a concept. There's a narrative that's been perpetuated for some time. Manipulated data, manipulated statistics, but there's an agenda behind it all. Nicola Sturgeon's taken it upon herself, albeit a puppet, she may very well be, point remains the same. So every single policy pertaining to climate change, the SNP are all over it. So is that a government that's doing what's best for you? Is there an alternative? No, there's not. Every single policy has climate change in mind. The same can be said for the Sustainable Development Goals in their entirety. There's even a programme in our schools now, Learning for Sustainability, which teaches your children about these very fucking goals. Propagandising your youth, our youth even, They really have our best interests at heart. This is independence. This screams our independence. Let's just leave the EU out of the equation for a moment and just look at it for what it is. Every single member of the SNP are all on board with the Sustainable Development Goals. They're all on board with Agenda 2030. They're all on board with doing thy bidding for the United Nations. And then, of course, we have Angus Robertson, who stood in our parliament not too long ago, videos on my channel, where he spoke about the need to be part of the EU because we share the same aspirations as apparently the bureaucrats do, unelected bureaucrats in the EU. And that's, of course, tackling the man-made climate change, or narrative, if you will, and implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. In times of crisis, we need to come together. Really screams our independence. The point to all of this is, this isn't a government. This is not a fucking government that's doing anything that's substantially beneficial for its people. In fact, they can't even define what our people are. Oh, wow. Just a wee bit more of this. So the First Minister committed Scotland to the global goals in 2015. Thin lips being, of course, the United Nations has set a series of sustainable development goals. These are global goals and targets that are part of an internationally agreed performance framework. All countries are aiming to achieve these goals by 2030. Independence. That's independence. When every single country is working according to the same framework. And it goes a step further in Scotland, of course, as it mentions here. The National Performance Framework, set up in 2007. This is where our national outcomes are generated from. But this National Performance Framework concept brought into fruition 2007. Who came into power in 2007? Oh, that's right, the SNP. And the goals share the same aims. Of course they do. How convenient that they share. The National Performance Framework shares identical aims to that of the Sustainable Development Goals, despite the fact one came out in 2007, the other came out in 2015. The National Performance Framework is Scotland's way to localise the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, isn't that convenient? The National Performance Framework has a focus on tackling inequality so that no one in Scotland is left behind. United Nations talking point. As we work together to achieve these goals. Oh, isn't that sweet? Isn't that great? So just to conclude this, it really is remarkable that anybody, irrespective of whether or not they're just paid to say the things that they say in a video, or if they genuinely believe it, it is remarkable to me how ignorant they appear to be, how uneducated they appear to be, because the SNP are no different to any other government across the entirety of the globe, for that matter even. They're all implementing these fucking goals. They're all part of the same problem. They all worked in lockstep, during the coup era. But yet, for some strange reason, the propaganda in this country will have you believe that the SNP are different. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke.
For me, the thought of independence is the thought of a better future, a thought of being able to vote and know that the government that's going to be in is going to be doing their best for you.
Building a Scotland that is prosperous for the future generations. Having children here and seeing what Scotland could be, it excites me that we could make it better.
I want aspiration for our people. I want good housing. I don't want poverty. I want our children to thrive.
I want our children to have the benefits of Scotland being an independent country.
We're talking about
in the EU. In the EU, though, no, we won't mention that part, will we? Because again, this is something that irritates me to no end. And I've said this on a plethora of occasions before. By all means, make the case for Scotland to rejoin the EU if that's really what you want. Something that I oppose. But the fundamental problem with all this is they've made the two synonymous. I've said this so many times before, but it just infuriates me how even today, at this point, after all of these years, so many people in this country can't see it for what it is. Oh, it goes without saying, it's not. They're two separate issues. It's not independence. It's not fucking independence. It's never been about independence. It never has been. This is about the European Union. This is what this is all about. So when people make claims like this, I want our children to have the benefits of Scotland being an independent country. What do you mean by that? Why don't you elaborate? Albeit, yes, you've only got a certain amount of time to speak and then it's edited for somebody else to come in after you, but the point remains the same. This is propaganda. Is this a case for independence, or is this a case for European Union renewal?
Of Scotland being an independent country.
We're talking about power to the people, greater decision making in Scotland, greater decision making at local government level.
Greater decision making for our people. Well, isn't that funny? Because as I've already mentioned, the Sustainable Development Goals, all of our policies are predicated on that. All of our policies, they're all in agreement. Every single party in our government in our parliament even is all in agreement. They've all agreed on climate change targets. They've all agreed that things need to go green. They've all agreed on the sustainable development regime. So I'm sorry, like that doesn't wash. It really doesn't.
And greater decision making in communities and workplaces.
We got to decide our own future, our own policies, our own issues.
The decision should be taken by us, not for us.
Scotland has the right to choose how we are governed, how we run our own country.
Well, this is a common talking point from the SNP. We have a right to choose. You know, and as I said earlier on, you're a democracy denier if you disagree with that core principle. But it's funny, as I've mentioned so many times, and I used to post it on my Twitter account quite a lot, just a wee clip of the Stop Brexit bus driving across the Edinburgh Bridge. Can't remember the name of it. You know, this is the same party that tried everything within their power prior to the EU referendum taking place to make it more difficult for the UK to leave. Then post-EU referendum, they did nothing, by the way, that would have looked like they were after independence, you know, like allowing the process to play out so they could act upon their mandate. No, they didn't do that. They tried everything within their power to ensure that the process of leaving the EU was either thwarted, stalled, or stopped completely, going so far as to even advocate for a second EU referendum at one point, the people's vote, as they called it. But yet these same fucking people now just seem to have completely whitewashed history and now speak freely about the right to choose. Yeah, because you're all about democracy. If the COVID nonsense didn't wake you up to the fact that they're no different to the rest, then their actions post-2016 EU referendum should have been that wake-up call. But if none of those two things have done it for you, I don't really know what will. I really don't know what will.
And I think it's as simple as that.
Scottish independence is our get with jail free card. The Westminster government are intent on dragging our country back generations, and I think it's not just for me, but it's for generations to come. It will be a much more open and honest and prosperous country.
What the fuck does that mean? What does that mean? Open and honest. Well, let's have an open and honest discussion about our demography. Because I think that's something that's fundamentally ignored by every single one of the people in this video. It's by and large ignored by our politicians within our government in holidays. They just speak freely about the requirement of open borders, effectively. A humane approach to immigration. You know, not just because it's racist to have a different view, but also because of our aging population. So replacement migration is coming into effect the minute they have the ability to do so. You know, why do we have an open and honest conversation about that? No, we won't, will we? Because that would be considered far right. The generations to come, there won't be many more generations of Scottish people if we continue down this trajectory, but that's something that we can't speak about, apparently. Open and honest. What are you talking about?
How is Westminster failing Scotland? Well, if you've got 2 hours, I can definitely answer that one.
Oh, go for it, Paul, go for it. And I'll tell you how the SNPs failing Scotland.
They are people who just want to make the rich richer.
Labour in Scotland follows Labour in England. Labour in England follows the Tories. I don't think any of them care about Scotland's wishes, opinions or choices.
Well, that's funny you say that, Paul, because as much as I don't like Westminster, it was Nicola Sturgeon who in 2021... I mean, I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but it just infuriates me how they promote this stuff. They put money into this nonsense, and it's portrayed as if it's all factual, because there's a undercurrent here of feel sorry for us. You know, we've got your best interests at heart. We're hard done by. We're the, as No Chance would say, we're the underdogs. No, you're not. The same SNP who, well, they must care. If Westminster, the assumption here is that Westminster do not care about Scotland's wishes, opinions, and choices. Hate to break it to you, pal. There isn't a fucking government really out there, bar maybe one or two, that care about their people. You know? They don't. I hate to break it to you. The SNP are no different in that front. But if we're going to go down this route, it was Nicola Thin-Lips who, just as early back as 2021, ruled out a second referendum post winning hypothetical India F2, meaning that a vote for independence is an instantaneous vote, a green lit vote to rejoin the European Union. Why? Because that's what the SNP wants. It's not what the people might necessarily want or not. And isn't it funny how all throughout this year, when all the hype of independence, quote unquote, has been generated again, they seem to be very silent on the matter of European Union renewal. Very silent, apart from the odd tidbit here and there in Holyrood. Strange that, isn't it? Very strange that. I mean, you're not democracy deniers, are you? Of course not. Because they care about our wishes, our opinions, and our choices, apparently. Ignorance. I do say ignorance is bliss, but sometimes ignorance is founded on fucking stupidity.
I think Brexit was a horrible decision, and that Scotland was taken out of the European Union against our will.
All against our will, the proverbial SNP trope. You know, I'm not going to play the video again. I've played it 1,000 times, but, you know, kind of calls into question the 62% vote that came to pass post the EU, well, when the EU referendum results came out. You know, Thin-Lips a few days before the referendum telling her voters that if they wanted independence, they needed to vote to remain in the EU. A vote to leave meant the premise for independence doesn't arise. Kind of influenced the vote, didn't it? It's not as clear cut as that. Now, what would have happened if the UK voted to remain in the EU? What would have happened if the SNP had been successful in their attempts to thwart, stall, or even potentially stop the referendum result from being respected post 2016? We won't be talking about independence today. The only reason that we are is because, as I've said, as I will continue to say, they have blurred the lines. They have made them one and the same. And it all starts, the entirety of this narrative begins and fucking ends with what that woman just said about being dragged out against our will. Started off with manipulating voters in order to bolster up that 62% to the position that it got to. And ever since then, they've ran wild with the narrative, revising history in the process.
It was just unfathomable.
And we never vote for the Brexit. And why have we been...
Well, over 1 million did, dickhead. Over 1 million people did. Yeah? What about me? I voted for it. I'm just saying.
hammered for that?
We were threatened that if we voted yes, we'd be out of Europe. And look...
Well, there you go again. This is what I'm saying. Revisionist history. Revisionist history. We were threatened. No. You were told by the EU themselves. That threat came to pass, if you want to call it a threat. In 2013, the SNP, the SNP were making fictitious claims that if Scotland voted to leave the UK, we would immediately inherit the UK's EU membership. We would be part of the EU because we were already a member, by proxy, due to being part of the UK. We would inherit the EU's membership. That EU membership, sorry. Eventually, the EU came out and said that was shite. Secondly, Spain threatened to veto. There was talk of Spain threatening to veto. It was acknowledged that we would have to leave the EU and then potentially rejoin. The problem, however, is I believe firmly that the SNP knew that there was a high probability we wouldn't get back in. Thus, they weren't too fussed about the 2014 referendum going the way that it went. But it was commonly known, it was commonly accepted, it was common knowledge that we would be out of the EU. It wasn't a threat, it was a reality. It really annoys me when they play that line. And if that was the case, right, let's just play them at their own game for a second here. If it's really just the case that, we were lied to, we were promised this, we were promised that, and 2014's referendum was more about the EU than it was to do with independence, then why were the SNP advocating for independence in the first place then? Kind of contradicts everything they stand for, apparently, if everything's about the EU. Why were the SNP advocating for a yes vote, knowing damn well that it could mean potentially, even if it was just a threat, quote unquote, we'd be out of the EU? Strange.
Look what's happened. We're out of Europe despite 60% of the population voting to...
I've already debunked that fucker.
...to stay in it.
And it's no way to run a country.
No, you're right, it's not a way to run a country. It's not. The SNP's tenure in power, it's not a way to run a country at all. And I could go on and on, but I'm not fucking going to.